Rolex has been a definition of success for decades, a symbol worn by CEOs, athletes, movie stars, and anyone who wanted the world to know they'd made it. In the early 2000s, Rolex was selling more than 800,000 watches a year globally, with waiting lists stretching 18 months or longer for the hottest models. But in 2025, something seismic is happening. America, once the biggest market for Rolex, is beginning to turn away. What built Rolex is now challenging it. Inflation-adjusted prices climbed relentlessly. A Submariner that cost around $2,500 in the 90s now carries a retail tag well over $10,000. The result? New buyers are priced out, and even dedicated collectors are questioning the value. Younger shoppers, in particular, are leaning toward independent watchmakers, tech-enabled timepieces, and brands that feel more authentic or futuristic. Meanwhile, resale figures, once bulletproof, have cooled. Where Rolex once held or increased value consistently, many models are now showing flat or even declining prices on the secondary market. That erodes the investment appeal that drove so many purchases in the first place. Today we'll unpack the rise, the peak, and the emerging decline of Rolex in America, and why the crown may not rule in the same way again. Let's get right into it. How Rolex became the world's #1. Rolex is one of the most famous watch brands in the world. It did not become famous by chance. The story began more than 100 years ago, and the brand's rise shows how hard work, clever ideas, and smart choices can create lasting prestige. In simple terms, Rolex became a symbol of success and achievement, something people around the world wanted to wear, not just to tell time, but to show they had made it. Rolex started in 1905 when a young man named Hans Wilsdorf and his brother-in-law Alfred Davis began a company in London. Their idea was simple but bold. They wanted to make reliable wristwatches at a time when most good watches were still carried in pockets. Wilsdorf believed wristwatches could be precise and beautiful. He knew that people would one day value them more than pocket watches. At first, they used Swiss movements, the inner mechanisms, from a maker called Hermann Egler. These movements were known for quality, but Rolex was the name Wilsdorf chose because it was short, easy to say in many languages, and fit neatly on a watch face. This name would go on to be recognized everywhere. Early on, Rolex made a big decision that would shape its future: quality above all else. The brand did not chase quick and cheap production. Instead, it focused on making watches that were accurate and reliable. In 1910, a Rolex watch became the first wristwatch in the world to receive a Swiss certificate of chronometric precision. This was a major achievement. The watch was tested for accuracy and earned a certificate that even many pocket watches did not have. Then, in 1914, a Rolex wristwatch earned a Class A precision certificate from the Kew Observatory in Great Britain. That honor had once been given only to marine chronometers, instruments used on ships for navigation. Suddenly, Rolex watches were seen as instruments of high precision. This helped people around the world see Rolex not just as fashionable, but as technically excellent. In 1926, Rolex introduced a watch that would change the industry. The Rolex Oyster was the first waterproof wristwatch. Rolex showed this watch to the world by submerging it in water and proving it still worked. A year later, when British swimmer Mercedes Gleitze swam the English Channel wearing an oyster, Rolex made headlines by advertising her journey. This bold marketing move made people see Rolex watches as strong, adventurous, and reliable. Another big innovation came in 1931 when Rolex invented the perpetual rotor, a self-winding mechanism powered by the natural motion of a person's wrist. Today, automatic watches with self-winding are common, but Rolex was one of the first to make this work well and reliably. The Oyster Perpetual, with both waterproofing and self-winding, became a flagship model that many collectors still prize. Over the decades, Rolex continued to build its reputation through innovation, precision, and strategic marketing. The date just, introduced in 1945, showed the date through a small window on the dial, a simple idea, but one that became a classic and is still widely loved. The Submariner, launched in 1953, became the most recognizable diving watch in the world. It was water-resistant to great depths and built to be rugged and dependable. The Submariner became a cultural icon, worn by explorers, celebrities, and even James Bond in early movies. Because Rolex did not chase short-term trends, people began to see its watches as more than tools. For many, owning a Rolex meant you had achieved something important in life. It became a symbol of status, a watch you inherited, and a gift you gave for big moments like graduations, retirements, and anniversaries. This emotional value helped Rolex grow beyond watchmaking into something that signified personal success and prestige. Even as Rolex grew, it stayed focused on craftsmanship and control. Today, Rolex is based in Geneva, Switzerland, and it designs, develops, and produces most of its watch components in-house. It does not rely on outsourcing, and much of the work is done by hand. This deep control allows Rolex to maintain its standards and gives customers confidence that they are getting something truly exceptional. Rolex's history shows a clear path, from a small company with a bold idea to one of the most respected luxury brands in the world. The rise of Rolex was built on technical firsts, smart marketing, and deep brand values that connected with people's desire for quality and meaning. For decades, this prestige made Rolex a dream watch for collectors and everyday people alike. In the early years of the 21st century, these roots continued to matter. People still see Rolex as a watch of achievement and quality. Despite changes in fashion and technology, many still think of Rolex as the ultimate classic watch, a symbol that once stood above all others. However, there's one problem that has consistently been influencing the sales of Rolex watches: when the hype fades. In recent years, Rolex watches did not just sell, they became much more than timepieces. They became objects of desire in a global market boom. This boom was powered by a mix of scarcity, high demand, and people who thought these watches were great for investment. This created a unique moment in the history of luxury watches. Some collectors call that period a golden age of watch speculation and value. Rolex, like many luxury brands, does not make millions of watches in 1 year. Instead, it controls production closely. The company makes around 1 million watches per year, which is low compared with many other brands and even compared with demand from buyers. This limited production means that there are always more people who want Rolex watches than there are watches available. Because Rolex does not flood the market with new stock, some models became very hard to buy at retail prices. For example, popular sports models, like the Submariner and GMT Master 2, often had multi-year waitlists at authorized dealers. Some buyers waited 2 to 5 years just to be offered the watch at official retail price. The result was that buyers who did not want to wait turned to another option: the secondary market. This is where watches are resold by collectors, dealers, or private sellers. Because so many buyers still wanted the watches and could not get them easily at stores, they were willing to pay more than the original price on the secondary market. This phenomenon is called a premium. A premium happens when the resale price is higher than the original price you would pay at an authorized dealer. For many Rolex models, premiums reached very high levels. At the peak of the boom, dozens of watches routinely sold for 30%, 40%, or more above retail price. Some rare references and discontinued models traded for hundreds of percent above retail because they were so scarce and collectible. Collectors and investors saw value in buying Rolex watches not just to wear, but to hold them as assets that could increase in price over time. As secondary market prices climbed, some buyers bought watches purely to sell later for profit. This speculative demand, driven by the belief that prices would keep rising, helped push prices even higher. The boom in the secondary market made Rolex watches feel like alternative investments. Some buyers compared them to gold or art, believing that scarcity and heritage would protect value even during economic ups and downs. Rolex's reputation as a brand with strong historical prestige made this idea appealing. One reason Rolex scarcity had such a big impact is because the brand also tightly controls distribution. Rolex sends watches to dealers based on long-term performance and loyalty. This means that dealers with history of purchases from customers often get better access to popular models than new or occasional buyers. This strategy made it even harder for everyday buyers to get the most sought-after models. For many years, this mix of limited supply and brimming demand created a market where speculation thrived. People across the world saw secondary Rolex prices as reliable indicators of watch health. Data firms like watch charts tracked how prices changed, and collectors followed trends closely. Some models were charted for premium changes quarter by quarter. But behind this boom was a key idea. Many buyers assumed that Rolex scarcity would continue or even get worse. That assumption kept them buying on the secondary market. Rolex's strategy of maintaining limited supply, whether intentional or a result of careful quality control, gave the brand an aura of exclusivity. Buyers often believed that if they did not buy now, prices would climb further. It was not only collectors who pushed prices up. Wealthy consumers in the United States, Europe, and Asia added to the demand, seeing Rolex as a status symbol and safe store of value. The watches appeared at major events, on social media, and in films, reinforcing their desirability. This blend of cultural visibility and investment demand reinforced speculative buying. During the height of the market boom, Rolex watches rarely stayed in windows at authorized dealers. Instead, dealers sent most stock directly to known buyers or allocated them to customers with established purchase histories. Many buyers ended up hoping to secure a watch through dealer relationships, waiting with little guarantee. This strong demand and scarcity pushed Rolex to be one of the biggest names on the secondary watch market. Even when overall prices began to adjust, Rolex watches held more resale value than many other brands and stabilized faster than most. Over time, as the broader industry experienced corrections and changes, Rolex remained one of the most resilient names in the market. Not until 2025, when the market went sideways and things began changing. How Rolex lost its monopoly. In 2025, the market for luxury watches, especially Rolex, began to change in important ways. Many of these changes were driven by how consumers think and how the economy works. For years, people around the world treated Rolex watches as symbols of success and even as investment assets. But recently, economic conditions and changes in consumer habits have started to shift that view. These forces are changing who buys Rolex watches, how they buy them, and why. One of the biggest economic influences on Rolex buyer behavior has been price increases for new watches. In early 2025, Rolex raised retail prices across many models. Some models saw prices rise by up to more than 8%. These increases came because the costs of precious materials like gold reached record highs, and Rolex adjusted prices to match. As a result, newer Rolex watches became noticeably more expensive. At the same time, something curious happened in the secondary market, that is, the market for used Rolex watches. Although retail prices went up, secondary market prices, which had been strong for years, began to decline. Reports show that used Rolex prices have continued to fall for several quarters, with resale prices dropping over time. This was partly because more pre-owned watches entered the market and fewer buyers were willing to pay high resale premiums. When consumers see that secondhand prices are falling, their behavior shifts. Many buyers who once bought Rolex watches purely for investment value began to rethink that strategy. The idea that Rolex watches would always rise in price, or at least stay stable, started to fade in people's minds. Instead, buyers began to evaluate watches more for their personal value as timepieces rather than as speculative assets. Another economic factor shaping consumer behavior is global inflation and economic instability. Many people have endured years of rising prices for food, fuel, and housing. When everyday expenses rise, discretionary spending can become harder to justify. Some buyers have chosen to delay big purchases or even give up the idea of luxury watches altogether because other financial needs take priority. This shift is especially true for the middle class, where disposable income is tighter. The way younger consumers think about luxury has also changed how Rolex is viewed. Younger buyers, including millennials and members of Gen Z, often do not value traditional status symbols the way earlier generations did. Many of these younger consumers are more interested in experiences, technology, and sustainability than they are in logos or high prices. They may pick watches from brands that emphasize craftsmanship and social values, or they might even prefer tech-focused devices like smartwatches that offer everyday practical features. Economic and trade changes are also influencing American consumer behavior regarding Rolex watches. In 2025, the United States government imposed a high tariff on imports of Swiss watches, including Rolex. This tariff, at 39%, made new Swiss-made watches significantly more expensive for American buyers. Many experts noted that these higher costs could reduce the appeal of buying new Rolex watches in the United States because the total cost was much higher than before, even before sales tax. Higher tariffs pushed some consumers toward the pre-owned market, since second-hand watches already in the United States do not face the same new import charges. But as demand for pre-owned Rolex watches increases, those prices could also rise again in response. Buyers face a complicated decision: pay high tariffs and retailer premiums for new watches, or compete in a crowded second-hand market with shifting prices. Consumer behavior also reflects cautious investment sentiment. In recent years, economic markets have seen ups and downs, including stock market volatility and uncertainty in global markets. Many consumers became more careful about big purchases that they once saw as safe bets. Rolex watches were once seen by some as stable luxury assets, but a market correction has made collectors and buyers more hesitant to view them purely as investments. Another factor is the changing global luxury landscape. While Rolex remains a strong global brand, demand has softened in some major markets. For instance, declines in demand from parts of Asia have influenced global price trends. Lower buying interest in one region can affect global resale pricing and shift how consumers think about the brand's global value. But even with some positive signals, buyer motivations are changing. Many consumers are no longer motivated by the fear of missing out or by price speculation. Instead, they are focused on personal taste, value for money, and practical enjoyment. They want watches they love and plan to wear, rather than pieces they simply hope will appreciate in value. This change in motivation also reflects a broader trend where emotional and personal criteria outweigh purely economic reasons. In all, the shifts in consumer behavior and economic issues influencing Rolex in 2025 come from a combination of different factors. Together, these forces mean that many consumers no longer see Rolex watches the same way they once did. In an age of economic caution and evolving tastes, Rolex must adapt to new buyer priorities if it wants to maintain its position in America and across the global luxury market. Now, that brings us to the reasons why many buyers are moving away from the Rolex brand: the culture and the competition. In 2025, the story of Rolex in America is not just about prices and tariffs. It is also about how tastes are changing, how other watch brands are rising, and how consumers are thinking differently about luxury. This point looks closely at competition, cultural trends, and why some buyers are now reassessing what Rolex means to them. A major force shaping the watch market in 2025 is the changing cultural picture among buyers, especially younger people. In past years, many buyers saw Rolex as the ultimate status symbol, something you wore to show success and style. But now, younger consumers, including Gen Z, are shifting their focus. These buyers often want items that show personal meaning, sustainable values, or modern style, rather than traditional symbols of wealth alone. Some buyers alongside Gen Z are turning attention to other watch brands and designs, or even to tech alternatives like smartwatches for everyday use. At the same time, the luxury watch world itself is becoming more competitive. Brands like Grand Seiko, Omega, Cartier, and others are gaining attention from buyers who once focused mainly on Rolex. Some of these brands offer fresh designs or historical value that appeal to new collectors. In fact, sales and resale trends show that some rival brands are growing in popularity, and buyers are showing interest beyond the classic Rolex names. This competitive environment makes Rolex look less like the only option for luxury watch buyers, and more like one choice among many carefully considered alternatives. A big cultural shift affecting Rolex is the rise of social media influence. In earlier years, social platforms helped fuel the hype around Rolex owning and speculation. But today, many influencers and creators are also showcasing a wide range of watch brands and personal styles. People on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube are presenting modern and diverse collections of watches that do not always include Rolex. Some creators even openly question old-fashioned status symbols and instead highlight authentic style or personal narratives. For many buyers, this trend matters more than tradition or prestige alone. Another shift is happening in how people see luxury and investment value. The idea of Rolex as a sure-thing investment has softened. Many buyers, especially those who are cautious or informed, are rethinking whether luxury watches should be treated like assets first and center. They now place more importance on wearing enjoyment, craftsmanship, and personal identity. This change has helped competitors gain share, because buyers are choosing watches that feel more meaningful to them personally, not just financially. At the same time, some brands have begun embracing new cultural connections that resonate with modern buyers. For example, luxury fashion collaborations, special editions tied to cultural events, or watches that reflect modern urban style are drawing attention. Rolex, known for its classic and conservative approach, has not historically pursued flashy collaborations or rapid trend changes. While this has kept the brand timeless, it also means that some buyers see Rolex as less exciting or less adaptive compared with brands that lean into pop culture or art world partnerships. Competition also comes from brands that offer strong value propositions. Many watch buyers today balance their budgets with careful comparison. When a buyer sees a watch with high-quality, innovative design and a slightly lower price than a Rolex, that choice can feel smarter, especially if that watch has timeless appeal and good resale history. Some buyers even prefer pre-owned watches from brands like Cartier or Omega that have grown in popularity, showing that Rolex is no longer the automatic first choice. The cultural shift is not just about age, it is also about identity and experience. Younger consumers often want stories behind the items they buy. They ask questions like, "Why does this appeal to me? What does it say about who I am?" Classic marketing that once defined Rolex is now sometimes seen as too formal or too traditional for modern, experience-oriented buyers. Many modern luxury watchers are drawn to brands that incorporate heritage with creativity and contemporary relevance. At the same time that culture is shifting, watch lovers are becoming more educated. There are many online communities, blogs, and review sites where consumers compare movements, finishing quality, brand history, and design details. Buyers now access data and insight easily, and they often make decisions based on informed comparisons, not just brand reputation. This empowerment of the average buyer means Rolex faces more competition for attention than ever before. Even among wealthy buyers who still appreciate luxury, tastes are diversifying. Some collectors no longer want a watch just because it is expensive. They want something unique, rare, or culturally meaningful. Limited editions from niche brands or watches with strong artistic design have become more attractive. Rolex's more steady and traditional release strategy, focusing on classic designs and slow evolution, can seem too predictable to buyers seeking novelty or cultural excitement. Finally, cultural trends also reflect a growing focus on sustainability and ethical value. Some watch buyers now consider the environmental and social practices of brands before buying. While Rolex maintains high standards of craftsmanship and materials, the brand hasn't positioned itself as a leader in sustainability. This gives room for brands that emphasize ethical sourcing and sustainable practices to connect with modern buyers. But what if American buyers are now rethinking Rolex's place in their lives and exploring new directions in the luxury watch world? The changing face of luxury. As we look ahead to the future of Rolex, especially in the United States and around the world, it's clear that the watch brand is entering a new and complex chapter. Rolex has been a leader in the luxury watch market for decades, but today's market is changing fast. There are challenges and opportunities. Some of the shifts will shape how Rolex is viewed in America in the coming years. One of the most important things to understand about the future of Rolex is that the overall luxury watch market is not static. It continues to evolve with new trends, technology, and consumer preferences. In 2025, the market has seen slowing global demand for watches, even as some brands and models remain resilient. Rolex, despite price increases and economic uncertainty, continues to hold a strong position among the world's top luxury watchmakers. However, the industry at large shows signs of contraction, meaning there are fewer watches sold overall, and buyers are becoming more selective. Looking to the near future, Rolex has made price adjustments that reflect broader economic conditions. In 2025, the brand raised the retail prices on many models, especially those made from precious metals such as gold and platinum. These adjustments respond to rising costs of raw materials like gold, and they also help Rolex maintain a perception of exclusivity and value. While this strategy may keep Rolex desirable among wealthier buyers, it can make it more difficult for average buyers to afford the watches at retail. This pricing strategy may also influence how the brand is perceived among American buyers. The United States has historically been a key market for Swiss watches, and Rolex has been a major player there for years. But with higher prices and ongoing economic pressures, some American buyers may look more closely at alternatives from other brands. Already, some experts note that while new Rolex prices are rising, the second-hand market is experiencing price declines and more supply, making pre-owned pieces more attractive to certain buyers. Another trend shaping the future of Rolex and the overall watch industry is the rise of technology and digital engagement. Watches are no longer just objects people buy in stores. Many brands are improving their online presence and virtual experiences, letting buyers try watches virtually or learn about products through digital tools. As the industry becomes more digital, brands that adapt quickly may benefit from reaching younger, tech-savvy buyers. In addition to digital changes, the watch world is responding to growing interest in authenticity and transparency. New technologies like blockchain are being used to help buyers confirm the authenticity of pre-owned watches. These tools help build trust in the market and could influence how pre-owned Rolex watches are bought and sold, potentially strengthening that segment of the market as a viable future path for Rolex's presence in America. Consumer attention is also shifting toward personalization and new styles. Many buyers today want watches that reflect their individual stories or tastes. Some watchmakers are responding with creative designs, smaller or more fashion-forward pieces, and collaborations with artists or designers. This trend suggests that in the future, buyers may value uniqueness and personal connection over traditional luxury heritage alone. At the same time, Rolex is not standing still. The brand is continuing to innovate its lineup. For example, emerging 2025 trends show Rolex introducing new color styles and updated models that appeal to younger and fashion-oriented buyers. These watches, like pastel dial Oyster Perpetual models, demonstrate that Rolex is aware of broader shifts in buyer preferences and is trying to engage with a new generation of collectors. Despite market challenges, Rolex still holds perceived value among collectors and buyers, especially for iconic models that are discontinued or rare. Some specific Rolex references have retained strong resale value, even outperforming many competitors on the resale market. This shows that Rolex remains a brand with enduring cultural and monetary appeal, even in an evolving market landscape. Still, the future of the brand in the United States will depend in part on how it balances heritage and adaptation. Rolex has a deep legacy of craftsmanship and prestige, but younger buyers sometimes seek innovation, storytelling, and cultural relevance in addition to heritage. To remain influential, some industry watchers believe that Rolex will need to engage younger audiences without losing what makes the brand special. Looking ahead, some experts also point to the fact that collectors and buyers are reassessing their watch portfolios. Today's collectors are more likely to think about experience over accumulation, meaning they may rotate watches, sell pieces more often, or balance long-term ownership with fresh choices. This attitude reflects a larger cultural shift toward fluid personal style and meaning rather than static status symbols. One of the biggest uncertainties for the future is how global economic policies and trade rules will evolve. Recent tariffs and negotiations have shown that trade relationships can quickly alter price structures and demand. While there have been hopes for negotiated deals that could ease tariffs on Swiss watches, the outcome remains a key factor in Rolex's future growth in America. The truth is, Rolex remains a powerful brand with deep roots in watchmaking and culture, but its future will depend on how it balances heritage with modern expectations. Some buyers may continue to embrace Rolex for its timeless value, while others may explore new directions in watches that better reflect their personal stories and tastes as the watch world evolves in 2026 and beyond. If this breakdown changed how you think about luxury, let us know in the comments. Do you think Rolex would be able to effectively evolve with the times? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss our next deep dive into the hidden dynamics of wealth, status, and the brands desperately trying to capture both. Because in luxury, nothing is permanent.